All right, and then we start Act 3, Scene 4. In this scene, we start with another clown character. So, like I said before, someone who's mostly there to bring some comedic relief, not a literal clown, though. And so we start with this kind of throwaway little bit by Desdemona and this clown talking, and she wants to find out where Cassio is. And they have puns with the word lies, like where does Cassio lie? Like where does he sleep? And he's like, I won't say he lies. He's a soldier. He could kill me for saying he lies. Whatever. So some puns there about that, just to bring a little levity to everything. Right after Othello has sworn to kill Desdemona, so it shifts from that intense scene where they're swearing oaths to this funny scene. Um, so then Desdemona realizes that she doesn't have her handkerchief anymore, and so she's upset about that. And Amelia, just is like, "Oh, I don't know where it is." And of course, she knows where it is, but she's like, "Man, if it weren't for the fact that I know Othello is just not a jealous person at all, like this would make even him jealous. Like if he were capable of being jealous, me losing that handkerchief would make him jealous." And Amelia's like, "Is he not jealous?" And she's like, "No." And what's interesting here, I didn't highlight this yet, but Desdemona says, "I think the son where he is born drew all such humors from him." So this is interesting. Obviously, when we talked about climate theory and we talked about the four humors, we talked about how people who were in hotter climates were supposed to be more jealous, were supposed to be more like heated, literally because of the sun. But she has this opposite idea. She says, I think the sun where he was born drew such humors from him, that he, like, it must have dried out those humors. So she's like, no, he is just so calm. He is never jealous about anything. And so then Othello comes in. So just like, kind of like in the moment where in Act One, the Duke said to Brabantio, "Anyone who has done this to you and your daughter, you can do whatever you want to them." And then of course they point to Othello, and he's like, "Oh crap." This is kind of another one of those dramatic moments because Desdemona is like, "Man, Othello really would be jealous if he were the jealous type." And Elia's like, "Isn't he jealous?" And then here he comes. So we're gonna see. And so Desdemona's like, "Okay, I'm going to make sure Cassio gets his job back. We're gonna settle this." So she starts to talk to him about Cassio, and he talks to her about the handkerchief. Um, Before he gets the handkerchief, there's some more things about humors here. So he takes her hand and he says it's moist, hot, hot, and moist. Okay, that's gross. I'm sorry, but he says, hot and wet. That is the um, uh, type of humor that's blood, and it's from that climate. So like freely given and like passionate, whatever. And he's kind of calling her those things, that you give out a lot. And he's not saying it directly; he's saying it indirectly, but he's kind of talking about that. Um, and she's like, "It is a liberal heart because it gave my hand to you and whatever." And he's like, yeah, he's concerned about it. So then he asks for the handkerchief. "Lend me my handkerchief," because remember, Iago told him that the handkerchief is that he saw Cassio with it. And the fellow's like, or Desmond's like, "I don't have it." And so they go back and forth. And he says this handkerchief is so important. And so then we see them yell back and forth about it. So she says, Cassio, and he says handkerchief. And she's like, "Cassio, handkerchief." And so of course, every time she wants to turn the conversation back to Cassio, that is making it worse. He's like, "Oh, I'm upset about this handkerchief that you gave Cassio, and you keep wanting to talk about Cassio." And then he kind of storms out. And here is where we start seeing Amelia. So Amelia, I think, is one of my favorite characters of all time. We haven't heard hardly anything from her in the first two acts, but we're going to hear more from her. So Amelia ends this, after Othello leaves, where Amelia's like, "Thought you said he wasn't jealous," and after he's acting this way, and Desdemona says, like, I've never seen him act this way. And Amelia says, "'Tis not a year or two shows us a man. They are all but stomachs, and we are all but food. They eat us hungrily, and when they are full, they belch us." So yeah, basically she's saying men she's kind of making a generalization about men that, at first men seem great, but after they're full, they are done with us. And we again know Amelia is Iago's wife, so she has probably literally had this experience. But anyway, Iago and Cassio come in, and uh, Desdemona explains to Cassio that Othello's a little upset, so it might take some more time. She's like, I were he in favor as in humor altered, I wouldn't know him. So like the idea is like he has changed so much internally that if he had changed the same amount externally, I wouldn't even know who he is. And not only is that showing the point about how he's changed so much, but also like we again have like back from the beginning in Act One where Brabantio said, "If beauty no delighted beauty lack, or beauty no delighted virtue lack, your son-in-law is far more fair than black." So kind of the inside outside thing, like if the insides match the outsides, then your son-in-law would be fair. She's kind of saying that like if his insides changed along, or if his outside changed along with his insides, I wouldn't recognize him now. He'd be a completely different person. Um, so again, we know that Desdemona fell in love with him for what's on the inside, and he's changed so much. And um, he was super angry, and they're like, "Can you be angry? He's so calm." Blah 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 blah. So, Desdemona, first is really taken aback by this and upset that Othello was so upset. But then remember, she's the perfect woman. So she goes back and she says it's probably something like important to do with the wars he's upset about. And so he's like, come bringing it back to me. Um, and so she's like, she blames herself. She says, it was unkindness in me to blame him. I'm sure that he's dealing with something terrible and I've indicted him falsely, like whatever. Amelia is like, well, hopefully it is something bigger and not jealousy. And Desdemona's like, well, I've never given him a cause to be jealous. And Amelia, again, with her insightful lines that we're going to keep seeing, that it doesn't matter. They are never jealous for the cause. It is a monster begot upon itself and born on itself. So Amelia is saying this is something that just happens. It doesn't matter if you give cause or not. Then we have a little short bit with Bianca where Cassio gives Bianca the handkerchief to make a copy of it. And I don't think we've talked about Bianca yet. Bianca is a prostitute. So Cassio is kind of taken up with this prostitute Bianca, and she's kind of obsessed with him a bit, but he gives her the handkerchief, which is an important plot point for later. Um, and that is it. So we'll see how this continues in Act 4.